I'm Helen, I'm 68 years old, and for a decade, I allowed my daughter-in-law to chip away at my peace, my confidence, and my place in my own family. I did it for my son and for the grandchildren I adore. But when she cornered me in my own kitchen and called me an old witch, her voice a venomous whisper, something inside me didn't just break, it solidified. In that moment, I realized that protecting my son's peace was costing me my own. And I decided, with a clarity that felt like a splash of cold water, that the price had become too high. My life before Chloe was a quiet one, but not an unhappy one. My husband, Richard, and I had built this house with our own hands, so to speak. He was an engineer, meticulous and steady, and I was a librarian, organized and observant. We poured our savings and our dreams into these four walls. Every floorboard holds a memory, every window looks out onto a garden we planted together. When we lost Richard to a sudden heart attack 15 years ago, the house became more than just a home. It became a sanctuary, a living testament to our life together. It was here I raised our son, Mark, from a bright-eyed boy into the kind, successful man he is today. Mark, my dear Mark. At 42, he still has the same earnest look he had as a child when he'd show me a drawing he was proud of. He became an architect, a creator of structures, just as his father had been, but with an artistic flair that was all his own. He is a good man with a gentle heart, which I've come to realize can sometimes be a liability. His goodness makes it hard for him to see the absence of it in others, especially in those he loves. And he loves Chloe. When he first introduced us 12 years ago, I saw what he saw. Chloe, an interior designer, was dazzling. She had a smile that could light up a room and a confidence that was almost hypnotic. She was beautiful, articulate, and seemed utterly devoted to my son. I was thrilled for him. I had always hoped he would find a partner to share his life with, and I welcomed her with open arms and an open heart. The first few years were smooth, filled with wedding plans, the excitement of a new marriage, and then the pure joy of my grandchildren, Lily and Leo. Lily, now 12, has my quiet, observant nature, and 8-year-old Leo has his grandfather's boundless energy. They filled this big, quiet house with laughter again, and for them, I would do anything. For a while, Chloe and I had what I considered a pleasant, if not deeply close, relationship. The cracks, however, started to appear slowly, so subtly that I almost convinced myself I was imagining them. The first incident was with the furniture. About 5 years ago, Chloe announced she was going to help me declutter. I was hesitant. My home wasn't cluttered, it was curated with a lifetime of memories. The centerpiece of my living room was a beautiful antique mahogany sideboard that Richard had bought for me on our 10th anniversary. Chloe, however, deemed it heavy and dated. One weekend, while I was visiting my sister, she and Mark surprised me. I came home to find my living room rearranged. A sleek, low-profile, minimalist console stood where my sideboard had been. My beloved piece, along with several other cherished items, was gone. "Don't you love it, Mom?" Mark had asked, his face beaming. "Chloe has such a great eye, it opens up the space so much." Chloe stood beside him, smiling that perfect, placid smile. "I hope you don't mind, Helen. The other pieces are perfectly safe in a climate-controlled storage unit. They were just weighing the room down. This is much more fresh." What could I say? My son was so proud, so happy. To object would have been to criticize his wife and reject his gift. So I smiled, my heart sinking, and told them it was lovely. I felt a flicker of resentment toward Chloe, who had gone behind my back, but I pushed it down. She was just trying to help, I told myself. She's an interior designer, it's what she does. But I knew deep down that it wasn't about helping me. It was about her imposing her will, her taste, on my space, my home. Then came the comments about my cooking. Sunday dinners had been a tradition since Mark was a boy. I wasn't a gourmet chef, but I cooked with love, making the simple, hearty meals Richard and Mark had always enjoyed. When Chloe joined the family, the critiques began, always disguised as helpful suggestions. "Helen, that's a lot of butter. Have you ever tried using apple sauce as a substitute?" she'd say, picking at her roast chicken. Or, white flour has almost no nutritional value. We really should be using whole wheat or almond flour for the grandkids. She would bring her own healthy dishes to dinner, elaborate quinoa salads and gluten-free desserts, and praised them effusively while my own food sat largely untouched by her and, increasingly, by Mark, who was eager to support his wife's lifestyle. The final blow was when she started feeding Lily and Leo before they even came over, telling me they had sensitive stomachs, and it was better if they stuck to their regular diet. My grandchildren, who used to devour my mashed potatoes, would sit at my table with full bellies, politely refusing the food I had made for them. It was a subtle, insidious way of making me feel obsolete, like my traditions and my care were no longer good enough. The most painful part was the way she managed my relationship with my own son. She became the gatekeeper. If I called Mark's cell, he often wouldn't answer, but I would receive a text from Chloe minutes later. "Hi, Helen. Mark's in a meeting. Is everything okay? Can I help?" She framed it as efficiency, as helping her busy husband, but the effect was that my conversations with my son became filtered through her. Our spontaneous chats became scheduled appointments. She would answer the landline at their house and speak for him, telling me about his week, his stresses, his successes. I was getting a curated, second-hand version of my own son's life. Mark, bless his heart, seemed oblivious. He saw a capable, supportive wife who was managing their busy lives and, in his mind, taking care of his aging mother. He didn't see the slow, methodical isolation. He didn't see the way Chloe's eyes would glaze over when I told a story about his childhood, or the faint, tight smile she'd give me when he wasn't looking. He saw the perfect picture she painted, and I, for the sake of his happiness, never dared to smudge the canvas. I was so afraid of being the stereotypical, complaining mother-in-law that I became a silent one instead. So I endured. I endured the updates to my home, the criticism of my lifestyle, and the distance she placed between me and my son. I did it for the moments when Lily would curl up next to me on the sofa, asking me to read to her from an old, dog-eared book. I did it for the afternoons when Leo would help me in the garden, his small hands covered in dirt as he carefully planted a new seed. These were the moments that refilled my well of patience. They were the reason I kept smiling, kept hosting Sunday dinners, and kept welcoming Chloe into my home. I thought my silence was a shield, protecting the fragile peace of our family. I didn't realize it was simply giving her the ammunition she needed for her next attack. The Sunday of the incident began like any other. The aroma of roast chicken, the one dish I still insisted on making my way, filled the house. I had spent the morning preparing everything: rosemary potatoes, honey-glazed carrots, and a simple apple crumble for dessert, using the recipe Richard had loved. As I worked, I tried to push away the familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach. I focused on the joy of seeing my grandchildren, reminding myself that their bright faces were worth any discomfort Chloe might cause. They arrived shortly after 5 o'clock. "Grandma!" Leo shouted, bursting through the door and wrapping his arms around my legs in a hug that nearly knocked me over. Lily followed, more serene, and gave me a warm, genuine embrace. "It smells so good in here, Grandma," she said, her voice a balm to my frayed nerves. Mark kissed my cheek. "Hey, Mom, sorry we're a bit late, traffic was a nightmare." He looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than usual. His work was demanding, and I knew he was under a lot of pressure on a new project. Chloe floated in behind them, a vision in a cream-colored cashmere sweater and perfectly tailored trousers. She was carrying a glass dish. "Hello, Helen," she said, her smile bright but not reaching her eyes. "I brought a kale and farro salad with a lemon tahini dressing, just something light to balance things out." "How thoughtful, Chloe," I said, my own smile feeling stiff. "You can put it on the counter." I refused to let her comment needle me. Today, I was determined to be unflappable. Dinner was a performance of civility, as it so often was. Mark talked about the challenges of his latest building design, his voice full of passion. I listened, asking questions and trying to engage him in the way we used to before Chloe became our intermediary. The children chattered about school and their friends. Leo had scored a goal in his soccer game, and Lily had won second place in a school art competition. I beamed with pride, hanging on their every word. Chloe, for her part, played the role of the perfect wife and mother. She'd place a hand on Mark's arm when he spoke, nodding with rapt attention. She'd gently remind Leo not to talk with his mouth full and praise Lily for her artistic talent, though her praise always felt a bit generic, as if she were reading from a script. "That's wonderful, sweetie. Your father and I are so proud." She barely touched my food, of course. She filled her plate primarily with her own kale salad, taking only a tiny, token sliver of chicken. "I'm trying to be good," she announced to T. He table with a light laugh, patting her flat stomach. "Summer is just around the corner." Mark nodded in agreement, piling more of her salad onto his own plate. I watched him, a dull ache in my chest. He used to love my cooking. He used to ask for second helpings of my potatoes. Now he ate kale. I tried to ignore it. I focused on my grandchildren. I asked Lily to describe her artwork, and she spoke with shy excitement about the watercolor techniques she had used. I listened to Leo give me a play-by-play of his soccer goal, his eyes wide with the memory of his triumph. In these moments, the tension at the table seemed to melt away, and we were just a family, sharing a meal. But Chloe always found a way to bring it back. As I was telling a story about a funny thing Mark had done as a child, he had tried to build a treehouse in the living room with sofa cushions. Chloe interrupted with a sigh. "Oh, Helen, I'm sure Mark doesn't want to rehash all those old stories." She turned to him, her voice syrupy sweet. "Darling, you must be exhausted. We shouldn't stay too late tonight." Mark, pulled from the pleasant memory, blinked. "Oh, no, it's fine. It's a funny story." But the spell was broken. The warmth in his eyes flickered and died. The rest of the meal passed in polite, stilted conversation. After we finished the apple crumble, which Lily and Leo devoured, much to my delight and Chloe's visible, though unspoken, disapproval, I began to clear the plates. "Don't worry about that, Mom," Mark said, starting to get up. "No, you sit, darling," Chloe said, placing a restraining hand on his shoulder. "You've had a long week. I'll help Helen." It was an offer I couldn't refuse without seeming rude. Mark, looking genuinely relieved, sank back into his chair and started chatting with the kids. So I found myself in the kitchen with my daughter-in-law, the sound of running water filling the strained silence between us. I washed, and she dried, her movements efficient and precise. For a few minutes, we worked without speaking. I could feel her presence beside me, a cold spot in the warm, steam-filled room. I concentrated on scrubbing a stubborn spot off a casserole dish, my knuckles white. I thought we might actually get through it without incident. I was wrong. I had just turned off the tap and was reaching for a towel when she moved closer. The clatter of the family's chatter from the dining room seemed to fade into a distant hum. Her voice, when it came, was so low it was barely audible, a silken, venomous thread of sound meant only for me. "You know," she began, not looking at me, but at the plate she was polishing with unnecessary vigor, "I really don't know why you go to all this trouble every week." I paused, my hand hovering over the sink. "It's not trouble, Chloe. I enjoy it." She finally turned her head, and her eyes were like chips of ice. The pleasant mask she wore at the dinner table was gone, replaced by a look of undisguised contempt. "Please," she scoffed, her voice still a whisper. "You just love playing the martyr, don't you? Forcing everyone to come here to this dusty old museum and eat your heavy, unhealthy food. It's pathetic." I felt the air leave my lungs. Every polite smile I had forced, every passive-aggressive comment I had swallowed, every piece of my life she had casually dismissed, it all came rushing back to me. But I remained silent, stunned. She took my silence as weakness, a cue to continue. She leaned in closer, her scent of expensive perfume thick and cloying. "Let's be clear," she hissed, her face just inches from mine. "You old witch, I only put up with you because of my husband. If it weren't for Mark, I would never set foot in this house again." Old witch. The words hung in the air between us, ugly and sharp. It wasn't just an insult, it was a declaration of war. It was the truth of her feelings, raw and unfiltered. For 10 years, I had made excuses for her. She's stressed. She's from a different generation. She means well. All those excuses evaporated in the heat of her hatred. Something strange happened then. The shock, the hurt, the anger, they were all there, swirling inside me. But another feeling rose above them, something I hadn't felt in a very long time: pure, unadulterated clarity. It was as if a fog I had been living in for a decade had suddenly lifted. I saw her for exactly what she was: a cruel, unhappy woman who saw my love for my family as a threat. And as that clarity washed over me, a laugh bubbled up from my chest. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a laugh of disbelief, of absurdity, and most of all, of release. I was no longer afraid of her. I was no longer afraid of being the difficult mother-in-law. I was no longer afraid of breaking the fragile peace, because I finally understood that there had never been any peace to break. I looked her straight in the eye, and my laugh subsided into a calm, steady smile. "Don't worry, Chloe," I said, my voice as quiet and even as hers had been. "You won't have to put up with it anymore. You won't be seeing me again." The look of triumph on her face faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. She had expected tears or an argument or a retreat. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected me to agree with her. Before she could formulate a response, I turned my back on her, picked up the dish towel, and began to dry my hands as if she weren't even there. The war was over before she even knew it had begun, and I had just won. I slept soundly that night for the first time in years. There were no dreams of arguments, no tossing and turning over replayed conversations and perceived slights. Chloe's ugly words, meant to wound me, had instead acted as a key, unlocking a cage I hadn't even fully realized I was in. I awoke on Monday morning not to the familiar feeling of dread, but to a sense of profound and resolute calm. The early morning light streamed through my bedroom window, the one that looked out over the rose bushes Richard had planted for me, and it felt like the first day of a new life. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at my kitchen table, the very room where the confrontation had occurred. It no longer felt like a crime scene, it felt like a place of liberation. I took out a notepad and a pen, the tools of my old librarian trade, and I began to make a list. The heading I wrote at the top of the page was simple: my house, my rules. The first item on the list was locksmith, the second was lawyer. I didn't hesitate. By 9 o'clock, I had an appointment with a locksmith for that afternoon. "Yes, all exterior doors," I told the man on the phone, my voice steady. "And I'd like the best quality deadbolts you have." The second call was more difficult, not because I was unsure, but because it made everything feel so terribly official. I found a number for a highly recommended family law practice in the city. When the receptionist answered, I took a deep breath. "Hello," I said. "My name is Helen Porter. I need to make an appointment to discuss securing my personal assets and property rights, specifically concerning my home." The words sounded so formal, so cold, but they were necessary. I secured an appointment for the following day. With the calls made, a wave of nervous energy washed over me. For years, my life had been defined by a passive desire to keep the peace. This was action. This was taking control. To ground myself, I decided to do something I hadn't done in a long time. I went into the spare room, the one Chloe had unofficially designated as storage, and I opened the closet. There, leaning against the back wall, were the rolled-up oriental rugs she had deemed too busy for my floors. Behind them, wrapped in thick blankets, was the top of my mahogany sideboard. The legs and body were in the storage unit she had rented, the one she paid for, a fact she mentioned often as a sign of her generosity. Seeing just that piece of polished, dark wood sent a pang through my heart. It was more than just furniture. Richard had saved for months to buy it for me. I remembered the day it was delivered, how his face lit up when he saw it perfectly settled in our living room. It was a symbol of our shared life, our history. And Chloe had banished it to the shadows. With a surge of determination, I pulled it out from behind the rugs. It was heavy, but I managed to drag the blanket-wrapped piece into the hallway. I couldn't reassemble it myself, but I could reclaim the part of it that was still in my home. It was a small act, but it felt monumental. It was a declaration that this house was mine, and its history would no longer be erased. At 2 o'clock, the locksmith arrived. He was a kind-looking man in his 50s with gentle hands and a quiet demeanor. As he worked, methodically replacing the old locks on the front door, the back door, and the side door from the garage, I felt a strange mix of emotions. There was a thrill of empowerment, a feeling of taking back my own security, but there was also a deep sadness. I was locking out my son. I was changing the locks on the home he had grown up in. Every turn of the screwdriver felt like a final, painful severing of the way things used to be. The locksmith handed me a small ring with 3 new, shiny keys. "There you are, ma'am, all set. Nobody's getting in without one of these." I held the keys in my palm. They felt heavy, solid, real. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you so much." After he left, I locked the new deadbolt on the front door. The sound of it clicking into place was the loudest, most definitive sound I had ever heard. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door, taking a deep breath. I had done it. There was no going back now. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a flurry of activity. I put on an old record, Vivaldi's The Four Seasons, and let the music fill the silence. I went into the living room and stared at the sleek, soulless console table Chloe had installed. It looked so out of place, so temporary. With a grunt of effort, I pushed it against a different wall, disrupting the perfect symmetry she had created. It was another small act of rebellion, but it made the room feel a little more like mine again. I knew the fallout was coming. I knew my phone would ring. I knew Mark would be confused and hurt, and that Chloe would spin a story of a mother-in-law gone mad with grief or loneliness. I rehearsed what I would say, but no script felt right. The only thing I could do was hold on to the simple, unshakable truth. She had called me a witch in my own home. She had revealed her true self, and I had believed her. As evening approached, I made myself a simple supper and ate it in the dining room at the big table that had seen so many family meals. I thought of Mark as a boy, sitting in his high chair, throwing peas on the floor. I thought of Richard at the head of the table, smiling at me over a flickering candle. I thought of Lily and Leo, their laughter echoing in the quiet room. Tears pricked my eyes. This was not a war against my family. It was a desperate act of self-preservation. I was not destroying my family. I was trying to save what was left of it from a poison I had allowed to spread for too long. I had just finished washing my single plate and fork when my phone, sitting on the counter, began to ring. The caller ID flashed a picture of Mark, Chloe, and the kids, all smiling on a beach. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, the first tremor. I let it ring for a moment longer, gathering my strength. Then, I picked it up, my hand surprisingly steady. "Hello, Mark," I said, my voice calmer than I felt. "Mom, what's going on?" His voice was tight with confusion and a hint of panic. "I just dropped by to get Leo's soccer jersey. He left it here yesterday, and my key doesn't work. Chloe's doesn't either. Did you change the locks?" I looked at the new keys sitting on the counter, gleaming under the kitchen light. "Yes, Mark," I said simply. "I did." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. I could picture Mark perfectly, standing on my front porch, the old key inert in his hand, his brow furrowed in utter confusion. He would be looking at the door to his childhood home as if it were a stranger. "You changed the locks," he repeated, as if the words themselves were a foreign language. "Why would you do that? Did something happen? Is there a problem with the old ones? You should have called me, I could have fixed it." His immediate assumption that it was a mechanical failure, not an intentional act, was so quintessentially Mark. He was a problem solver, a man who fixed things. It had never occurred to him that the problem might be one that a new lock couldn't solve. "The old locks were fine, Mark," I said, keeping my voice level. "I just decided it was time for a new set." "Time for a new set? Mom, that doesn't make any sense. Why wouldn't you tell me? I have a key to this house. Chloe has a key, we've always had keys." His confusion was rapidly turning into frustration. I could hear the sharp edge in his voice. "I'm your son. We come and go all the time. What if there was an emergency?" "If there's an emergency, you can call me," I replied, my calmness a stark contrast to his rising agitation. "Just as I will call you if I need you." "Call me, what is this about?" he demanded. In the background, I could hear Chloe's voice, a concerned murmur. What's wrong, darling? What did she say? Mom, Chloe's here, she's worried. We're both worried. Did someone try to break in? Are you scared? Just tell me what's going on. This was the first test. It would have been so easy to lie, to invent a prowler or a faulty lock, to smooth things over and avoid the confrontation. The old Helen would have done that in a heartbeat, but the old Helen was gone. I'm not scared, Mark, and no one tried to break in, I said. I took a breath, anchoring myself. I made a personal decision to increase my own security and privacy in my own home. That's all. Privacy? From who? From me? From your family? His voice cracked with disbelief and hurt. We are your family. What on earth did we do? I could hear Chloe more clearly now. Let me talk to her, Mark, she said, her voice laced with that familiar, saccharine concern. I braced myself. No, I've got it, Mark snapped, a rare show of irritation toward his wife. He was clearly flustered. Mom, listen, this isn't like you. Something must have happened at dinner last night. Was it something I said? Was it Chloe? She said you two had a nice chat in the kitchen. A nice chat. The audacity of it almost made me laugh again. Chloe was already spinning her web, painting a picture of domestic harmony that I had foolishly disrupted for no reason. She was a master of her craft. Mark, I said, my voice softening slightly. TLY? I didn't want to hurt him, but I couldn't protect him from the truth forever. My reasons are my own. The house is my property, and I've decided I no longer want anyone else to have a key. It's that simple. Simple? Nothing about this is simple, he exclaimed, his voice rising again. We're supposed to come for dinner next Sunday. The kids are expecting it. How are we supposed to? What? Are we supposed to ring the doorbell now at our own mother's house? The absurdity of his question struck me. Yes, Mark, I said quietly. That is generally how visitors enter a home. They ring the doorbell. The silence that followed was heavy and profound. I had drawn a line, not in sand, but in solid steel. He was on one side and I was on the other. He, the son who had always had free run of his mother's house, was now just a visitor. I knew it was a shock to his system, to the very foundation of what he considered family. I don't understand, he finally stammered. I don't understand what's happening. Let me speak to her, Mark. She's obviously upset about something, Chloe's voice insisted, closer to the phone this time. Helen, are you there? It's Chloe. Are you all right? We're so worried about you. If I said something to offend you, you just have to tell me. We can talk through anything. Her performance was flawless. She sounded like the epitome of a caring, bewildered daughter-in-law, desperate to mend a mysterious rift. Hearing her voice, so full of false sweetness after the venom she had spit at me just the night before, solidified my resolve. It was like pouring concrete into my spine. I'm fine, Chloe, I said, my voice turning cool again. There's nothing to talk through. The decision is made. But what about Leo's jersey? Mark cut back in, his voice desperate to latch onto a concrete problem he could solve. He needs it for his game on Wednesday. Leave it, Chloe said smoothly in the background. We can just buy him a new one, Mark. Don't pressure her. She's clearly going through something. She was already building her narrative for him. Your mother is unstable. She's not herself. We have to be patient and manage her. I will wash the jersey and leave it in a bag on the front porch for you to pick up tomorrow, I said, my voice clipped and efficient. I will text you when it's out there. Mom, this is insane, Mark said, his voice dropping to a low, pleading tone. Please just tell me why. I closed my eyes. How could I tell him? Your wife, the woman you love, hates me. She called me a witch. She has been emotionally tormenting me for years, and I've been too scared to tell you. He wouldn't believe it. He would see it as an attack on his choice, on his life. He had to get there on his own. All I could do was create the space for that to happen. Mark, I am tired. I'm going to bed, I said, which was a lie but a necessary one. I love you. We can talk another time. Good night. Mom, wait. I ended the call. My hand was trembling. I placed the phone face down on the counter, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The first shots had been fired. Chloe had played the victim, Mark was caught in a storm of confusion, and I had held my ground. But the silence in my house felt different now. It was no longer peaceful. It was the quiet before the battle. I knew this was far from over. Chloe would not take this lying down. She had my son's ear, and she would be whispering her own poisonous version of the story into it all night long. The question was, would he eventually see the truth, or would I lose him completely? The next morning, I went to my appointment with the lawyer, a woman named Mrs. Davis who had sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. I sat across from her polished desk, and for the first time told the whole story to a third party. I didn't embellish or get overly emotional. I laid out the facts, the slow erasure of my identity in my own home, the passive-aggressive comments, the gatekeeping of my son, and the final, ugly whisper in the kitchen. Mrs. Davis listened patiently, taking notes without a flicker of judgment on her face. When I finished, she looked at me over the top of her glasses. "You did the right thing, Helen," she said, her voice firm. "Changing the locks was a necessary first step. This is your property, bought and paid for by you and your late husband. You have every right to decide who enters it and who holds a key." She then walked me through the next steps, ensuring the title was solely in my name without any confusing amendments, and the possibility of drafting a formal document, like a trust, that would protect my assets and outline my wishes clearly, so there could be no ambiguity in the future. I left her office feeling validated and, more importantly, armed with knowledge. I was no longer just reacting emotionally, I was planning strategically. As I had promised, I washed and dried Leo's soccer jersey. I folded it neatly and placed it in a clean tote bag along with a couple of his favorite chocolate chip cookies. I left the bag on the front porch and sent Mark a simple text. "Leo's jersey is on the porch." He replied almost instantly, "Thanks, Mom. We need to talk. Properly." I didn't respond. The confrontation I was expecting came that evening. It was just after 6 o'clock when the doorbell rang. Not the familiar sound of a key in the lock, but the formal, two-tone chime. My heart leaped into my throat. I smoothed my sweater, took a steadying breath, and walked to the door. Looking through the peephole, I saw them both. Mark was standing there, his face a mask of strained anxiety. And beside him, her hand tucked into the crook of his arm, was Chloe. Her expression was one of deep, sorrowful concern. It was a masterfully crafted performance before the curtain had even risen. I opened the door only as far as the security chain would allow. This small, metallic barrier felt like a shield. They could see me, and I could see them, but they could not enter my space. "Mom," Mark began, his voice tight. "Can you please take the chain off? We need to come in and talk this out like a family." "We can talk perfectly well right here, Mark," I said, my voice even. Chloe's face crumpled beautifully. "Helen, please," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "This is killing Mark. It's killing me. I don't know what I did, but whatever it was, I am so sorry. I lie awake at night going over every word I said in your kitchen. Did I sound ungrateful for the meal? I was just trying to pay you a compliment on how you manage it all." The lie was so bald-faced, so audacious, that it took my breath away. She was rewriting history right in front of my son. "Is that what you call it, Chloe?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "A compliment." Mark jumped in, eager to mediate. "See, this is just a misunderstanding. Chloe is trying to apologize, Mom. Can't you just accept it so we can move on? Whatever she said, she didn't mean it the way you took it." "Oh, I think I took it exactly as she meant it," I replied, my gaze fixed on Chloe. Chloe's eyes filled with tears. They shimmered on her lower lashes, perfectly catching the evening light. It was a remarkable display. "I don't understand your hostility, Helen," she whispered, clutching Mark's arm tighter. "I have only ever tried to love you and respect you as my own mother. I look up to you. All I want is for us to be a happy family, for Mark's sake, for the children." She was using my grandchildren, my greatest weakness, as a shield. The anger that had been simmering inside me began to boil. "Don't you dare bring Lily and Leo into this," I said, my voice low and sharp. "This is about you, and what you said to me when you thought no one else could hear." What did I say?" Chloe cried, turning her tear-streaked face to her husband. Mark, I don't know what she's talking about, I swear, I think maybe she's not well. Maybe she's lonely and confused. It was the checkmate move she had been planning all along. To paint me as senile, unreliable, a confused old woman making up stories. I saw Mark's resolve waver. He looked from his crying wife to my unyielding face behind the door chain, and his expression was one of profound conflict and pain. He wanted to believe his wife, the pillar of his life. The alternative, that she was a cruel manipulator, was too terrible to contemplate. Mom, he said, his voice pleading. Chloe is distraught. You're scaring her. You're scaring me. Are you? Are you sure you remember things correctly? And there it was. He was doubting me. After everything, after 42 years of being his mother, his constant, his rock, he was doubting my sanity based on the tearful performance of a woman he'd known for a decade. The pain of that was sharper than any insult Chloe could ever have thrown at me. I felt something inside me harden, crystallize. It was the last bit of sentimental softness, the part of me that had wanted to protect him. I realized in that moment that I couldn't. He was a grown man, and he had to make his own choice. I looked past Chloe's theatrics and met my son's eyes. My voice, when I spoke, was devoid of anger or pleading. It was calm, factual, and final. Mark, I said, for 10 years I have watched your wife subtly undermine me at every turn. I have watched her try to erase my husband's memory from this house. I have watched her isolate me from you. I have stayed silent because I love you and I didn't want to cause trouble in your marriage. I was wrong to do so. My silence has not brought peace, it has only enabled her cruelty. Chloe gasped dramatically. Helen, those are horrible, vicious lies. I ignored her. My focus was entirely on my son. On Sunday night, in my kitchen, your wife leaned in close to me and whispered, "You old witch, I only put up with you because of my husband." There was no me's. Understanding, it was not a compliment. It was the unvarnished truth of how she feels. I am done catering to that hatred. I am done pretending for your benefit. I let the words hang in the air. Mark stared at me, his face pale. He looked at Chloe, who was shaking her head, sobbing quietly into his shoulder. She's lying, Mark, Chloe wept. Why would she make up something so terrible? I don't know, Mark mumbled, looking utterly lost. I knew I had reached an impasse. He was caught between two opposing realities, and he was not yet strong enough to choose the harder one. I am not asking you to believe me, Mark, I said, my voice softening just a fraction. I am telling you what happened, and I am telling you my decision. This is my home. Chloe is no longer welcome in it. You and the children are, but you will come as visitors by invitation. Those are my terms. You are a grown man, you are a husband and a father, and you are my son. You need to decide who you believe, but you will not do it here on my doorstep. With that, I gently but firmly closed the door, shutting out Chloe's manufactured sobs and the sight of my son's tortured face. I slid the deadbolt home. The click echoed the finality of my words. I leaned against the door, my legs trembling but my heart strangely steady. I had told the truth. I had laid out my boundaries. The victim had played her part, and the narrative was now in my son's hands. The next move was his. The days that followed were a study in silence. A heavy, suffocating quiet settled over my life, a stark contrast to the emotional storm that had just passed. I didn't hear from Mark. Not a call, not a text. I knew he and Chloe would have picked up the jersey from the porch. It was gone when I checked, but there was no acknowledgement. The silence was his answer, and it was a painful one. It meant he was either paralyzed by indecision or, worse, that he had chosen to believe Chloe's version of events. I tried to keep busy. I tended to my garden with a ferocity I hadn't felt in years, pulling weeds as if they were the tangible roots of my problems. I reorganized my library, the scent of old paper and binding glue a comforting balm. I tried to read, but the words on the page often blurred as my mind drifted back to the pained look on Mark's face. Had I been too harsh? Had I pushed him away for good? The loneliness was acute. I missed my grandchildren terribly. I missed the sound of Leo's boisterous laughter and the quiet intelligence in Lily's eyes. I had drawn my line in the sand to protect my peace, but the immediate result was a profound and aching isolation. Doubts began to creep in during the quiet hours of the night. Maybe Chloe was right. Maybe I was just a lonely old woman, misinterpreting things, creating drama where there was none. I had to continually remind myself of the cold contempt in her eyes, the venom in her whisper. That was real. My reaction was justified. I held on to that certainty like a life raft. The break came on a Thursday evening, nearly a week after the confrontation at my door. I was washing my dinner dishes when my phone buzzed on the counter. My stomach clenched. I dried my hands and looked at the screen. It was a text message from Mark. My heart hammered against my ribs as I opened it. But it wasn't a message for me. It was a screenshot of another message, one with a light green background, indicating it had been sent from someone else's phone. At the top of the screenshot was the contact name, Chloe. I had to sit down. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone steady. I squinted at the tiny text, my breath caught in my throat. It was a long message, clearly part of a conversation. It was from Chloe, but it wasn't addressed to Mark. The context implied she was texting a friend, probably her best friend, Sarah. But she had, in a moment of carelessness that could only be described as cosmic justice, sent it to my son instead. The message read, Sarah, you will not believe the week I'm having. The old witch has completely lost it. She changed the locks on the house. Can you believe the nerve? After everything I've done for her. Mark is a total mess, completely eating out of my hand, of course. He actually asked me if I really said what she claims I said. I just turned on the waterworks and he folded like a cheap suit. It's almost too easy. He's so desperate for us all to be one big happy family, he can't see the truth right in front of him. The problem is, this complicates my long-term plan. I thought I could just gently nudge her into a nice little condo within the next year, but now she's dug her heels in. That house is worth a fortune, and it's our kid's inheritance, not her personal museum. I've put up with her dusty furniture and her bland cooking for 10 years. I've earned my spot in that house. Now I have to play the long game, the concerned, loving daughter-in-law to his confused, aging mother. It's exhausting, but it's the only way. He'll come around. He always does. He loves me more than he loves her. I just have to be patient until she either gives in or, well, you know, nature takes its course. LOL. I read it once, then I read it again, and a third time. Each word was a physical blow: old witch, cheap suit, dusty furniture. Nature takes its course. LOL, it was all there. Her contempt for me, her manipulation of my son, and her cold, calculated plan to take my home. It was her entire soul laid bare in a single, catastrophic text message. My first feeling was not anger, but a profound, hollow sickness. This was the woman my son loved, the mother of my grandchildren. This was the poison that had been living in the heart of my family. But that sickness was quickly followed by a wave of pure, unadulterated vindication. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't confused. I was right. A second text from Mark came through while I was still staring at the first. This one was just 3 words. I am so sorry. And then a third. Can I come over? I typed back a single word, yes. 20 minutes later, my doorbell rang. When I opened the door, my son was standing there alone. His face was ashen, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow. He looked like he had aged 10 years in the last week. He didn't say anything. He just stepped inside, and the moment the door was closed, he broke down. He didn't just cry. He sobbed great, shuddering gasps that shook his entire body. He wrapped his arms around me and held on like he was a little boy again, lost and terrified. All the anger and hurt I had felt toward him for doubting me melted away, replaced by the overwhelming, primal instinct to comfort my child. I held him, patting his back, murmuring, "It's okay. It's okay, I'm here." We stood like that in the entryway for a long time. When his sobs finally subsided, he pulled back, his face blotchy and wet. He couldn't meet my eyes. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "I am so sorry. I didn't believe you. I wanted to, but I couldn't see it. I didn't want to see it." I know, Mark, I said softly. She lied to my face, he continued, his voice shaking with a mixture of rage and betrayal. She sat there, crying, telling me how much she loved you, how she would never say such a thing, and I believed her. I defended her. I made you feel like you were the crazy one. He finally looked at me, and the shame in his eyes was devastating. How could I have been so blind? For years, her dusty furniture, her bland cooking, it's all there, everything you said. How could I not see it? You saw what you wanted to see, I said, leading him to the living room sofa. You saw the happy family you wanted. There's no shame in that. She is a very convincing liar. He sank onto the sofa, putting his head in his hands. What do I do now, Mom? My whole life, my marriage, it's all a lie. She doesn't love me. She just loves what I can give her. The house, the inheritance. He spat the word out like it was poison. The veil had not just been lifted, it had been torn to shreds. My son was finally seeing the truth in all its ugly, heartbreaking detail. The confrontation was no longer between me and Chloe. It was now between my son and his wife, and the foundation of their life together had just crumbled into dust. We talked for hours that night. Mark, stripped of his denial, finally opened up to me in a way he hadn't since he was a teenager. He confessed the little things he had noticed over the years but had dismissed. Chloe's subtle eye rolls when he was on the phone with me, her jokes about my old-fashioned ways that always had a sharp edge, the way she would systematically get rid of any gift I gave them. He had explained it all away, telling himself she was just pragmatic, modern, different from the family he grew up in. He had built a fortress of rationalizations to protect his marriage, and now, seeing it all collapse, he was devastated. She played me, Mom, he said, staring at the floor. She made me choose between my wife and my mother, and she made it seem like you were the one creating the conflict. All this time, I thought I was the peacemaker, the one holding everything together, but I was just her pawn. You are not a pawn, Mark, I said firmly, placing my hand on his. You are a good man who was deceived by a very manipulative person. The blame for this lies with her, not with you. He finally looked up, his eyes filled with a new, somber resolve. I went home and confronted her, he said quietly. I showed her the text. For a second, just a split second, I saw it, the real her. Her face went cold, the mask dropped. There was no remorse, just fury that she'd been caught. And then, just as quickly, the tears started again. She tried to say her friend was goading her, that it was just a stupid vent session, that she didn't mean any of it. And you didn't believe her this time, I saw. Ted more than asked. He shook his head. No, not this time. The text didn't just talk about you, it talked about me. He folded like a cheap suit. He loves me more than he loves her. It wasn't just about getting the house. It was about winning, about controlling me. That's what I can't forgive. He took a shaky breath. I told her to pack a bag. She's at her sister's house. The kids are with me. They're confused, but I just told them we needed some space. The thought of Lily and Leo in the middle of this mess sent a sharp pain through my heart. Oh, Mark, the children. I know, he said, his voice thick with guilt. That's the hardest part. How do I explain this to them, their mother? Their whole world is about to fall apart because of her greed and her cruelty. This was the new foundation we had to build, one based on truth, no matter how painful. You will do it with love and honesty, I said. You will tell them that sometimes adults make very big mistakes and that you and their mother need to figure things out separately. But you will also tell them, every single day, that you both love them and that Grandma loves them, and that none of this is their fault. In the days and weeks that followed, Mark began the difficult process of untangling his life from Chloe's. It was messy and painful. There were lawyers involved, and arguments over finances and possessions. Chloe, realizing her performance as a victim would no longer work on Mark, turned vicious, trying to paint him as an unstable man being manipulated by his meddling mother. But the text message was undeniable proof. It was the rock upon which all her lies shattered. I did not revel in her downfall. I only felt a profound sadness for the destruction she had caused. My victory wasn't in her defeat, but in the reclamation of my own life and my relationship with my son. Mark and the children started coming over for dinner again, not just on Sundays, but on random weeknights. There were no more kale salads or passive-aggressive comments about butter. We filled the house with the aroma of roast chicken and fresh-baked cookies. We sat around the big dining table, and Mark would tell me about his day, really tell me, without a filter. Lily would show me her latest drawings, and Leo would recount his soccer adventures. The laughter in the house was real again, unburdened by tension. One Saturday, Mark came over with a toolbox. "I have an idea," he said with a small smile. Together, we went to the storage unit Chloe had rented. We signed the papers to close it out and loaded the rest of my mahogany sideboard into his truck. Back at the house, he spent the entire afternoon carefully reassembling it in its rightful place in the living room. When he was done, he stepped back, wiping a smudge of polish from his hand. "There," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "The way it's supposed to be." I ran my hand over the smooth, familiar wood, a symbol of my past and now, a symbol of my future. Tears welled in my eyes, but this time they were tears of gratitude. My life is different now. The relationship with my son is stronger and more honest than it has ever been. Chloe is no longer a part of our daily lives. She and Mark are proceeding with a separation. She sees the children on weekends, but under strict, supervised conditions for now. There are boundaries, ironclad, non-negotiable boundaries. My home is my sanctuary once again, a place of peace and warmth, not a battleground. I have my son back. I have my grandchildren. But most importantly, I have myself back. I learned a hard lesson. That peace at any price isn't peace at all. It's surrender. Sometimes the bravest and most loving thing you can do for your family and for yourself is to change the locks, draw a line, and demand the respect you deserve. My name is Helen. I am 68 years old, and my home is finally my own. So, to anyone out there who finds themselves in a similar situation, feeling silenced and marginalized in their own life for the sake of keeping the peace, I hope my story gives you a measure of strength. It's never too late to reclaim your voice, to set your boundaries, and to demand that your own happiness be part of the family equation. The truth has a way of coming to light, and your true family will find their way back to you when it does.